Good afternoon, everyone. When Tim asked me to actually talk on this subject, it was a bit of a soft one for me because I already started thinking about it because I actually received this scan from my son to say that I was going to become a grandfather. And that prompted me to start thinking about where's she going to be and what's going to be like for her as she grows older. And one of the statistics that came to my mind was that she's got as much chance of reaching 65 as my grandmother had of reaching 1 year of age. So just think of that, the impact of that on life insurance. Before that child was even conceived, insurance had a part in her life, because like most young children today, before they had children, they were trying to save a house, and so they were in their 30s. And at that point, after having got themselves established, that they decided to get health insurance, and there's a 1 year waiting list. So she was held back a year while that all took place. I couldn't get her out of my mind because I didn't ever expect to become a grandfather, and I kept this sort of picturing her in this sort of way, and one song kept coming to mind.
I hear babies crying, I watch them grow, they'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Well, someone like Darryl Cowan, who knows me very well, would say, well, she'll know much more than you'll ever know. That wouldn't be bloody hard, Alan. But I thought I'd do the right thing by her, and so I took a book that I'd already written, and I actually rewrote it once I knew her name, so that Granddad taught her insurance. So I did that the day that she was born, because I didn't know her name by then, and I then went all the way through and explained insurance to her. I actually drafted this book after the Brisbane floods, where our industry copped a real bashing, just like the Christchurch earthquakes here, and I just wanted somebody to get out into schools so that people didn't think we were a villainous organisation. So the day she came home from hospital, I actually read her own book. I then thought, there's a couple of other books I could actually read to her. A grandfather has to get his grandchild to sleep somehow, and what better way? But she's been born since, and she's a wonderful little child. She's been to 5 insurance conferences. She's got her own LMI onesie, so she is really embedded into this industry. Now, if I'm thinking back then when I was 10 years of age, while other children were listening to music or playing footy, I had this man as my hero. Even though he spelled Allan incorrectly, I thought, until I learned about insurance, that he had the coolest job in the world, and I really wanted to get into space. And I was reading avidly everything about space, and I've still got the record of him going into the 4-minute trip that he took up into outer space and got back. Now, had he not, or his government not been going down the price route, he would have been the first man into space. But because they went that way, the Russians actually beat them. But we're living in a really interesting time, and a very fortunate time for my generation, and that just about anything you can possibly think of or dream of, you've been able to achieve in my lifetime. The only thing I haven't done is actually get into space. The closest I've been is in the Concorde at 55,000 feet. So I've actually spoken to Audrey's parents about, on her 10th birthday, taking her up in the space shuttle, or this Virgin Galactic, and getting up there. Now, all the way through, again, insurance has been there to help them. Already, the spaceport's being built, and insurance has been there. Now, for most of technology, insurance has been there. Cuthbert Heath was on the very first commercial flight in London, in the UK, and actually drafted the policy on that flight, and aviation insurance was born. All the way through, insurance has been there. Business interruption was the slow one, and there's a whole reason for that. But I had the privilege of meeting this gentleman, Professor Robin Pearson from Bristol University in the UK. After I read his book, I really enjoyed it, so I wrote to him, and one of my trips to the UK, he actually came up to London and spent the afternoon with my son and I. And he reassured me that what we knew is that if you don't have a vibrant, honest insurance industry, then you're not going to have a vibrant economy, and you're not going to be able to monetize new technology. People just won't have the guts to do it. The closest I've been to going into space is actually getting a drone. So I love this little toy, and the reason I had it was I was looking after a parts manufacturer in the automobile industry. And it's under so much pressure, it was important for me to actually get the moles so that to see if we could actually save them. But the fire brigade wouldn't let me get in there. Now, how I got around that was that I got my staff to actually run interference with all the interfering fire brigade and police officers, and I snuck in the back door and went through the premises. Completely stupid. If I got hurt, no one would ever thank me, but it's just the way I am. Now, I can do that because I own my own business. I can't expect in today's litigious society any of my staff to do that, so we had to work out a way to do it. And so now we use a drone, and if this is just a premises, if I go back one, this is a premises where the fire brigade and police had sealed it off. We actually flew the drone over it, we could see it, we actually flew down inside the premises, and at this stage the police think it's all cute and wonderful and actually let us do it, and we share the video with the fire brigade, the police, the insurers and everyone else. But it's great, we don't have to now risk our lives going up on the roof, etc. We do it very early in the morning because when we first got it, insurance for drones was very, very expensive and I couldn't afford it. It was hard enough sneaking the drone through my wife, let alone getting the bloody insurance. So there's my son flying this. If I zoom in, you can see he flies it different to me. I actually watch it, but because he was flying it inside the premises, he actually just watches it off the iPhone. He packs it up in a knapsack and he takes it anywhere. I'm a bit loath to show this one because this is a friend of mine's drone, not my own, but he happened to be there where there was a fire, and I just don't want people to think that if business gets a bit slow that I'll actually start dropping incendiaries from my drone to actually trump business. But we're not the only people. We use it for risk surveys, we're using it for all sorts of things. Certainly it's a lot safer for us to go up on asbestos roofs. We can actually use the drone. But they're using it to deliver textbooks. Amazon trying it in the US and they're doing it in Australia. But there's been a number of drone accidents, people doing stupid things, flying it over into the White House, flying it over the MCG, and it's causing all sorts of problems. I just hope it doesn't destroy what is really a powerful and wonderful tool. You've had your own incidents as well, and the government actually thinking about bringing it back to earth. I was speaking at a conference in about March, and I was asked to go and help a broker develop an insurance program for the 3D Printing Association in Australia. And my first thought was model guns. They can print guns, what's that going to cause? When I got there was all sorts of things that they were doing, from little nerds in garages to universities. And one of them, of course, is in the medicine area. Now, I thought this was just a plastic piece that they were sticking on someone's face, but it's much more than this. Say you had a cracked skull. They print something like a fishnet. They put it in your head. They inject stem cells. It grows very quickly, and then that thing that they've printed actually dissolves. So it's really revolutionising the way medicine is. And they can do this with tissue, livers, skin, bone. It's just fantastic what they're doing. Just on Saturday, I went into Harvey Norman to look at a television, and I see they've got 3D printers there now for $899, and they're printing all sorts of things. But again, it's different. They're actually starting to print the elements, so they can print glass. And what they're already doing is, say this wall, one of these walls here, before you would send in a carpenter to put up the studs, or maybe the metal, you'd then rough in the electrics, you'd then put up the plaster, you'd come back and you'd wire it off, you'd put the plumbing in, all those sorts of things, then you'd paint it. Now they're just printing that whole wall. They're printing it with the electrical circuitry in it, with the plumbing in it. So what is that going to mean to all the trades involved there? And they're using it in fashion. They've built the first aircraft using a 3D printer. Not the aircraft, the engine. So they printed the engine and it's 1/3 the weight of the original engine. It flies beautifully. And in China, they built 12 of these homes in 24 hours. Printed the whole home, everything, electrics, glass, the whole kit and caboodle. So again, it's going to help, certainly would help in things like the Christchurch earthquake to give you temporary accommodation. So leaving that one alone for a second, if we just go into robotics, that's gone such a long way since the time that I was a child and we used to watch Lost in Space. I was in Barcelona in March, and you could go up to this robot on the beach and ask directions in just about any language in the world, and it would shake your hands and give you direction. It's fantastic. So they're using it to deliver parcels, to carry bags around. Perhaps my granddaughter will have someone just to make sure she's doing her homework, that she's not going on inappropriate sites, that some scumbag's not trying to chat her up on the internet. But it is huge business already. Amazon actually bought a company and started a subsidiary company. This is their pack and send area. It's got 99.95% accuracy. 1,000 robots picking the stuff up and moving it around. And I'd met the professor who actually invented this. He developed this from that robot wars, doing it just as a hobby. He sold his business for 784 million euro to Google. Not to Google, to Amazon. So enormous. But again, think of the number of jobs that have been affected by this technology, the improvements in profitability for Amazon, etc. And where does it make the little guy versus the big guy? The Internet of Things already is fast approaching that there are more devices connected to the internet than there are people on Earth. And certainly be double that by the year 2025, and maybe even 2020. And we've first seen the first refrigerator be used as a hacking mechanism, so the baddies have come in through the fridge and gone back out. So what's all this mean? So that you're driving home from work, your iPhone will let, or whatever device you've got, I'm not picking on a brand, but it will let your home know, the fireplace will come on, the champagne will be chilled, the radio, or your favourite radio station or your television station will come on, not the one that's bagged in the insurance industry, obviously. And everything will be set up for you. It will keep a record of what you're consuming out of the fridge. It will send a note off to Woolworths or Coles or Pick n Pay or whatever it is that you use, and your groceries will be delivered to you perhaps by drone. But what does this mean about cyber insurance if this is going to be hacked? And I'll come back to that. In the circle of life, last year was certainly an interesting year with the news of the birth of or the impending birth of my granddaughter. But this is my mother, and she told me that she wanted to know OBE. And I told her, look, we don't have imperial honours, Mum. And she said, no, I just mean getting over bloody 80. So she had her 80th birthday, and that was her last goal in life, and she achieved it, and then sadly passed away. But at her 80th birthday, she told me, look, I don't want to be a burden on you and your brother. I've got funeral insurance. It's all going to be okay. Now, she took that policy out in 1953. Okay? So she's paid the premium all that time, and when I sent the form in, I got the princely sum of $1,260. It didn't cover for the meal or the wake, let alone the burial. And why I raise this is that the amount of television ads about this form of insurance, and I've just done some maths on the back of an envelope, and I'm staying corrected, but I looked at my son's age and looked to the age that he would expect to live in Australia as a male, and he would pay $146,600 in premium for a $10,000 sum insured. If someone was, I can't remember if it was 50 or 60, I just can't remember it, but lived to 76, the average age of a male, you'd pay 3 times the sum insured. Now, why I worry about this is that there's such a guilt factor about this form of insurance that I'm convinced that in that low socioeconomic strata where people are just staying home watching daytime television and bombarded with this, they're buying this and not buying home and contents insurance. They probably don't own their home, but they don't buy contents insurance. They're not even buying motor insurance because they've got this real guilt factor that they should be buying this form of insurance. So I'd like to see that go, and the Australian government is certainly looking at that very closely, a bit like what happened in the UK. The other thing that I'd like to see go on long before 2025 is the taxes on insurance. There's been another report issued this week that shows that if they move it off insurance, there's an enormous benefit to the economy, and I support all the things that the Insurance Council here are doing to remove it. I put this slide up because I happen to be going through Melbourne Airport security at a time where there was the Caulfield Cup, the motocross or the motorcycle GP, and 1,000 Jehovah's Witnesses had come to Melbourne all in the one weekend to get baptised. And so there was a 750 metre, 3/4 of a kilometre line to get through security. It just shows how much we're travelling, and this whole thing about age as well is all linked into this. We've got 300 million people in China, in India now who have got enough money to actually start buying cars, moving from bicycles to motorcycles to cars to condominiums to travelling. And the average age, I was in Africa last week speaking, and the average age of that country's population that I was in was 19. In Australia it's 37. So they've got this, half their population hasn't even started work yet. So there's a whole pile of things about age on one hand and the opportunities in Asia in particular, where you've got so many more people coming through and so much opportunity to sell insurance. But at the same time, we've got my generation and your country and my country where we live much longer. Are we really looking after our people? You know, we've got cut-offs for travel insurance. It can be 70, 75 or 80. But, you know, at my age, I don't take any medication. I don't wear glasses. I've got really good health, touch wood. I want to live to 100. I want to be able to travel, go up in that spacecraft. I want my travel insurance to be able to be there as well to support me. The other thing that I worry about is that the governments want us to work longer, but then they're stopping superannuation and work cover allowances, which may not affect you with your no-fault insurance, but it certainly affects us, and that needs to be addressed. The day that I found out Audrey's name, I did two things. I went in and got her domain name, so audreymanning.com, and I bought her a personalised number plate. That's what grandfather parents do. Anyway, if you're a nerd like me, you do anyway. So when that envelope arrived with the number plates, I said to myself, I opened it up and looked at it, and for 30 seconds I was very happy with myself, and the next 30 seconds I thought, you're a bloody idiot. She probably won't need a driver's licence. She probably will not own a car.
What happens if tomorrow's cars need a whole new kind of insurance?
You probably recognise that was a Zurich ad from about at least 5 years ago. And I should have picked up on that thought, the driverless car. So I could envisage, and particularly in a city like Singapore, where the cost of a vehicle is 3 or 4 times as much as it would be here or in Australia, and you've got a small population, why not just press your mobile phone, have an electric car come up to you, drive where you want, no parking, no registration, no nothing, reduce the congestion, the carbon footprint, all the benefits from that. So I really believe that's going to happen. Can anyone recognise the car? It's a Tesla. There's a little video on it for you.
Welcome to our vision for a highly automated car and its unique driving experience. Although it looks like your common everyday car, a host of smart new features ensures that driving is no longer a chore. It helps to reduce the load on the driver by taking care of highway driving. Philip, a young professional, has been using his new car for a few weeks now. The car has been learning from his routines and can predict destinations. On selecting the destination, the car allows Philip to optimize his time by balancing the share between manual and automated driving. As Philip sets off, he looks at the upper left corner of the instrument cluster where the drive state indicator is located. It is a quick reference for the time left in the current driving mode. Apart from the regular navigation view, the split display provides Philip with an overview of his route. With this, Philip has a clear picture of where automation is available. He can access additional features with aid of the menu on the left. As he approaches the ramp to the highway, one of the maps switches to the top view so that he has a better view of his surroundings. After entering the highway, the drive state indicator communicates to Philip that automation is available. Also, 2 special buttons on the steering wheel start glowing. As Philip presses them simultaneously for 3 seconds, the car switches to automated mode. Philip can now confidently take his hands off the wheel as he knows that the car is in full control. With the free time in hand, Philip decides to get some work done and opens his office inbox via apps. For a better view, he moves the inbox to the top panel and goes through his unread messages. Philip can perform common actions by interacting with the on-screen buttons or with voice commands.
Project
He starts to dictate his reply to an email. It's not the same as working at his desk, but with the new car, Philip can be productive even while on the road. While on the highway, the car encounters a slower-moving vehicle in front and sees an opportunity to change lanes. It communicates its intention by displaying a visual on the instrument cluster and a notification on the central display. If Philip wishes, he can select this notification to access the top view and monitor the maneuver. Once the car has completed the maneuver, Philip can rate it based on common driving parameters. This helps the car to learn his preferences and to improve its motion behavior for better comfort. Having taken care of all the important work, Philip still has some time left before taking back manual control. He decides to relax and watch a few online videos. When it is time for Philip to take back control, he is notified in steps. With a few minutes left, the drive state indicator switches to orange, and then red, depending on the urgency of the situation. If Philip still doesn't take back control at this point, the car would find the next safe spot on the shoulder and pull over. Switching to manual mode happens in the same way as activating automation. As Philip presses the buttons simultaneously for 3 seconds, the car switches back to manual mode. On reaching his destination, the car provides Philip with some smart statistics on his journey. At a glance, Philip can compare the efficiency of the car in manual and automated modes, and also his savings. From being a mere mode of transport, the car has evolved to become a part of Philip's digital lifestyle. It allows him to be productive when he is on the move and can be relied upon for needs far beyond mobility.
I got that video with the blessing of Bosch, so I should acknowledge that. There are so many videos like that out there now. Audi, they'll self-park the vehicles. That means we've got narrower parking spaces, we've got there's less things in your doors, etc. But there's just so much more from this. Nissan, so many other companies are going into the driverless car area. We had 2 trials so far in Australia, one in Adelaide and one in Melbourne. They closed the freeway and down they went. In the Adelaide one, the media jumped on it because they put up an inflatable kangaroo on the road and they hit it. So that was the whole story for the media. Where in fact Volvo are saying that they're bringing their technology for North America with elk and whatever, moose and the reindeer technology to Australia for the kangaroos. The kangaroos are a lot more agile, but they reckon they'll have that solved. Volvo say by 2020 you will not be killed in or on a brand new Volvo. Now that's a very big statement. Now if a plane hits you, I'm not sure how you're going to pull up, but it really is amazing. There's been heaps of conferences about this now. It's in the press. Can the insurance industry survive this? Will bad driving be eliminated? Let's hope so. The first insurance conference, and I think the chap from UE went to this, so it'd be good to hear what he thinks of it. You may have heard about the first cyber attack. There was actually 2 cyber attacks. One, they did it from inside the vehicle, wired to the vehicle, but this one, they did it wirelessly. If you haven't seen it, it was a Jeep. It was a terrifying situation. Surprisingly, one of the hackers was a very senior employee at Twitter. Why he would be involved in a hack on a vehicle, I don't know. But it was terrifying for that operator. So what does this mean for our insurance? Does that mean we're going to have a cyber policy and you'll tick that you need to have a cover for your home, your business and your car? Or is this an area that the manufacturer's got to worry about the cyber exposure? But what happens if you haven't done the upgrade to your software? Where does all this lie? Even if we don't get that far, and I believe we will, having said that, I remember being on my first driverless train. That was the one from the Docklands, or whatever it says, the Docklands light rail. And I actually got in the front row and was sitting there biting my nails on a railway line. So what's it going to be like in a car? I don't know. But these are just various ways that we're looking at collision avoidance, waiver, etc. And I think the scariest one is the middle top photograph, where the car senses it's going to hit someone. So does it aim for the guy in the red, or does it go for the one in the green? So the guy in the red is someone very important to society. He's an insurance professional. The person over there in the green, he's got a terrible rating from Uber because he hasn't made his payments, and on Airbnb he's got a reputation for leaving his towels on the bathroom floor, so it swerves over and gets the other guy. So people are seriously concerned about how they're going to make those judgments as to who they're going to hit and who they're not going to hit. Now, for our industry, it is the trillion-dollar game changer, and there's a book by a South American chap who's done the analysis on driverless cars. If you think about the fact that we're going to have far fewer claims, what does that do to the manufacturers? We won't need as many cars if we don't own the cars, if they're perhaps owned by Macquarie Bank or some other organisation. Where does that leave the motor vehicle companies themselves, the manufacturers? And it's a big part of many economies. The US economy is built on the motor industry. So where does that get affected? Where does the finance, how's that affected? Then think about panel beaters. Do we need as many panel beaters? Yes, they'll be there for hail damage, but if there is a little ding, what does this mean? Does it mean that the claims officer has a 3D printer at his desk and he just prints a new bumper bar and posts it out to the client? Or does the client have their own 3D printer at home already and you just send them the software and say, download this and clip it on your car? So the big thing, the litigation lawyers, again, not so much in your country, but in other countries, litigation for motor vehicle accidents, particularly personal injury claims, is really big business. Where are they affected? Hospitals will be affected. Far few people will be injured. But I see that as a good thing for someone like me, because that energy is going to move from that sector into the ageing sector, so I'll have better health cover as I get older, thank God. But in Australia, 26 cents of every dollar spent is on motor insurance. Now the insurers take that money and they invest it. If we drop by half, that leaves half as much the pool for the insurers to invest. So is that going to put much greater pressure on expenses, everything else? It is going to affect our industry, as it's going to affect probably more than any other thing I'm talking about today. This driverless car and the accident avoidance is going to be a really big game changer that we do have to address as an industry. Before she was even born, my granddaughter-to-be was on social media, and clearly there's a lot to be said about this. Again, cyber attacks, there's also reputational damage, and that's been touched on by the speakers today, so I don't want to repeat on that, but it is a very real thing that our industry has to be mindful of. And I was laughing when you said you went to a broker and you had to wait for the insurance broker to give you a quote. With the mobile devices now, and there's predictions that in 10 years' time we won't have PCs, it'll all be mobile devices. So it's just going to be so much easier for people to buy, particularly motor insurance, just off an app. You'll be able to put your registration number in, and all insurers in Australia do this now. You put your registration number in, so it just pre-populates the insurance quote right through and takes away all the problems about accidental keying in the wrong age of the vehicle or whatever. So it's much more accurate information. Then we're starting to move into this wearable technology, and that comes in a whole pile of range of ways. Just your watch, we've got the health funds giving you a Fitbit. Does that information go back to the health fund to keep an eye on you to make sure that you're a good customer to keep for the future? This one probably scares me a bit too much, reminds me too much of Nazi Germany. But I was thinking about this, and I was thinking again back to my granddaughter. I'm fortunate that my son only lives 3 doors down the road from me, and I've got this picture of my little granddaughter waddling up to visit Granddad. And I thought, in pet insurance, they've come up with this great idea, because you lose your pet, instead of putting up all these signs that Fluffy or Rover's missing, you actually just go out with your phone, and this device will tell you where the animal is, and you go and collect it before, hopefully, it's been hit by a car. So I thought, I'm going to get one of these. I'm going to put it around my daughter's waist, a little belt, and then I can track her coming up to visit Granddad. My wife told me that if I did that, our 40 years of marriage would just disappear. So I've got two choices. I can either just buy her a mobile phone and track her with that, but there are devices already for, mentally, for many people with disabilities, that you just sew it into their jacket or whatever. So I'm sure that this will be available very, very shortly, but not as a pet one, but as a human one. But this whole thing about cybersecurity, big data, all this information, it is a very serious issue. I heard a statistic yesterday, now I haven't tested it, but it told me that with homes and businesses, you've got less than a 2% chance of catching fire, but you've got a 73% chance of being hacked. But our focus is still on the fire insurance, and as an industry, or our customers, I think, don't think it'll happen to them. It'll happen to anyone else but them. But the second thing is I'm convinced in my mind that we haven't priced this product right. I think it's too cheap for what can happen. We saw in my country that management liability wasn't priced correctly, and that caused a bit of a crisis. I think this one could be a horrible thing for the industry if we get that pricing wrong. And the difficulty for us is we don't have accurate statistics. Virtually the only statistics we're getting is out of North America, and I'm just not sure. I'm sure it's a guide, but it's not perfect. So to help with that, I wrote one of the books I wrote was, and I'm starting to write smaller books for the customer rather than books for the industry. So my son and I wrote a book about cyber security, trying to get people to actually understand it. With policy comparison, it was our 19th class of insurance that we compared. Now, we're not an aggregator. We don't ever talk about price. This product was invented so that people who sell insurance could actually talk about the benefits of the quality of the product. And, I disagree with the lady, I think Sue, from, buying electricity is different from buying insurance. Power is power. Policies range from absolute rubbish to fantastic policies. And, if people just buy on price, it's going to be a disaster for our industry. So this product's been there, and what's good, I suppose, for insurers is that most insurers now subscribe to this because it allows them to divert staff away from keeping an eye on their competitors. They can use them somewhere else, and this is a very inexpensive way of getting the data. The other thing we did was we made it the 12th class of insurance on Risk Coach, which again is a sales tool and a PI protector for those that sell or underwrite. One of the things that we're seeing is that in my lifetime, the home that I grew up in, we had one television. I saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon on it. And when I left, that television was still there. A couple of years later, my mum updated it to a colour television. We had the one refrigerator. Now things are so disposable, and we see spikes, and your fraud indicator model, I'm sure, will show that people lose their phones and laptops, etc., when there is a new model come out. And that's how they're making these huge profits, these digital companies. But it's something that as an industry we have to be mindful of and work out some solutions around that. Now, another issue, I could have picked anything. I could have picked the automobile industry, I could have picked the panels, the EPS panels that's being put up on construction. People think that they're fire resistant and they're not. They've got heaps of water issues. But one area that's just worrying me is the electrical area and the problems that we're seeing with faulty equipment. We had in New South Wales, it was actually right across Australia, it was discovered in Victoria, but it was the New South Wales government that finally put an end to it, so that electricians were buying this cheap cable, putting it through people's homes, and then found it to be faulty. For an electrician, he doesn't have any cover. He doesn't have a product guarantee policy. A lot of people think that product liability is going to cover the product. It doesn't. It covers the liability arising from the product. There's no damage done at this stage. It's just faulty and you have to recall it. And there's no cover for these people. We had safety switches in Queensland. You'd expect the safety switch to be okay. This is the number of electrical appliances that were recalled in Australia 2014. Now, some of them are fantastic brands, some of them are crap brands, some of you'd expect to go bad. But one of the things that's concerning me is the time it takes. What's the use of recalling Christmas lights on the 22nd of January? It's just a bit late. One of the ones that I was personally involved in that terrified me was a company called E-Cables. Now, this is not the white electrical cables in your house. This is the serious stuff that goes from the main switchboard up through a building like this, and it was 30% cheaper than the market. And because it's high voltage and you're putting several wires together, if you buy an extension lead, it will typically say, please unwind it if you're going to put it under any load. So you can imagine the heat generated from a cable of that size. Now, the Australian standard says that the insulation should be able to withstand 168 hours or 7 days at 120 degrees. We take off the insulation. I took it to a firm and had it tested. Within 5 minutes, the insulation had shrunk. So you can see how much it's gone down. Under Australian standards, it's not supposed to deform by more than 5% after 7 days. And look what it's done within 5 minutes. Now, I reported that to everyone I could. It took over 6 months before that product was recalled. That terrifies me. But then it goes back to our customers, our electricians, our builders who have gone off and bought this, have put it into properties. But then, how do we actually address this? Do we go to, and one of the most famous brands of hotels in the world has got this in their Melbourne brand new building. How does the insurance industry address that? Do they still insure it? So why I'm so concerned about the electrical appliances, it's obviously people can die from it, be seriously injured, but also the fire risk. And there's some way we have to address this issue, A, to reduce the incidents, but also to protect the builders, etc., who are buying these cheap products because they're trying to get a price advantage. At the end of the day, it bites them on the backside. I touched on the ageing issue. We are all expected to live a lot longer. I think by 2025, Australia will have somewhere between 40 and 100,000 people over 100 years of age. So to do the right thing by our industry, LMI has always been proud to try and develop products that help the industry. This is going to be the LMI Retirement Village. We're going to actually open it here in New Zealand in 2025, and if you'd like to come along and see Tony or I, we'll book you a spot. It's been touched on again. One of the big issues, obviously, is global warming, and this is the latest National Geographic. It's got the whole book is dedicated to it. It is something that's serious and we have to address. North Queensland, but also the Pacific Islands with hurricanes and cyclones. Flooding is an enormous problem for Australia. We've got 654 rivers that can flood, and we tried to develop and I actually put a paper in for a thing like Flood Re for our country. The government decided it was too expensive and they didn't go down that route. I wanted also that any new developments, if they're on a flood zone, that they were redlined and you couldn't buy flood insurance for the future. But that, again, didn't get through. We've got the bushfires. Australia's expecting the worst bushfires in history this summer, is whether or not they're going to do that. The last time I heard that statement, that Australia's going to have the driest summer, was 1974, and Brisbane was under about 20 feet of water. So the scientists don't always get it right. But the whole thing about global warming is quite interesting. I was actually commissioned only last week to write a policy for the wine industry in England, because suddenly they can start growing grapes again. And of course, earthquake is a big issue for you guys. Then that's not related to global change or global warming, but it's certainly a natural disaster that we have to address. The last time we had such a huge change in technology and really turned the world on its head was the Industrial Revolution. Before then, we're told that, I was taught that the Chinese invented some form of insurance 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, whereas the latest anthropologists are saying that wherever there's been long-term trade, long-distance trade, there's been some form of insurance, and insurance could be between 80 and 120,000 years of age. Then we had the Great Fire of London, and of course we had the birth of modern-day fire insurance and all those things, and then along came the Industrial Revolution. So instead of insuring a house or a coffee shop, we're suddenly insuring these huge, massive factories, with wool from Australia and New Zealand, with all that lanolin, with spinning jennies, technologies that no one had even thought of, and yet the insurance industry was always there to help them. They were typically set up by a group of men like Dr. Nicholas Barber in London after the Great Fire of London, got there with 12 mates and said, we can't let this happen again. The Great Fire, which is going to have 350th birthday next year, it destroyed 800 years GDP for London. So can you imagine 12,000, 13,000 buildings being destroyed, churches, pubs, all those things destroyed, and not one skerrick of insurance? So he got together with 12 people and they created a modern-day insurance company. So other places, and that's why we had all those cute names, the Manchester Insurance Company or the General Accident from Perth and all these places where there were people got together with a social conscience to create these insurers. And then some of them failed along the way, but then we developed reinsurance and we worked out how to protect ourselves. Now we've got it all over again with the digital age. And Again, without insurance, Professor Pearson's argument is that there wouldn't have been an industrial revolution. Who could have invested in building canals, bridges, railways, all those massive steamships, etc., all those factories, without the protection of insurance? What banks or what financiers would have lent money without it? And we're the same today. But as has been touched on, and I thought Mr. Jones's paper was excellent. It was the best I'd heard ever on just the pressures on reinsurance. But every part of our industry is under enormous challenge to me, with the bonds and the pension funds coming into reinsurance, with insurers holding more capacity themselves. Insurance companies seeing that the reinsurers, if you think about Munich Re, I think they're up to over around 25% of their business now as a reinsurer is actually as a direct insurer. Swiss Re, I think the last time I looked, was 16%. So they're seeing that coming that way. Then they're also seeing new entrants being very, very, very profitable with no legacy systems. We're also seeing a lot of underwriting agencies. $2 billion of premium is now going to Lloyd's from Australia through underwriting agencies. So that's eroding the position of the traditional insurer. Insurance brokers, all the amalgamations, and you've seen that with Steadfast and NZ brokers here. The regulations, all those other things challenging us. What made me think about this was that when I was coming up to see Tim to discuss this talk today, I was flying from Christchurch up to Wellington, and the guy before me had left his magazine there, and in the magazine was an article saying that by 2025 Australia would need 1/10 the lawyers and accountants that we currently have. Now, I'm an FCPA, a Society of Certified Practicing Accountants, and I'm also attached to the law faculty of the university, and neither institution had mentioned this. So I wrote to them and said, is this true? Is this article true? And they both came back and said, yes, it is, because of digitalisation, with smart technology, everything else, we're not going to need as many people. When we're starting to think about this, but we don't want to tell anyone because we want people to still send their students to us, parents to send us to law school and accounting. So then I was thinking about where does it fit for insurance and insurance brokers? Are we going to be in the same sort of field as that, loss adjusting? Is this all this technology I've been talking about is going to affect builders and panel beaters and everyone else? Is it going to affect our industry? And I think we have to be realistic about that. Some of the things that, as a claims person, worries me, and this was one of the first robots I ever saw from Lost in Space, if you're old enough to remember, was this book out of the United States about the way to make money. I think it was developed by McKinsey's strategy that the insurance industry's biggest expense is claims. If you can reduce the claims, then you can make more profit. And I'm seeing this in the soft market in my country, where claims that would normally be paid are being delayed, denied, and it's certainly not the decision of higher management. There's no edict that I can find that anyone's been asked to do it. It's just the claims officers, whether it's a lack of training or whether it's just something's been said to them, but it certainly is a problem that is damaging our brand. So I'd like to see that go. The other thing that I think has to end yesterday is this whole selling on price, and that's why I don't really like the aggregator sites. I started this analysis in one form or another about 7 years ago with Zurich in a tough market, and then it's been done through Allianz and then Vero. This what I'm talking about today was with CGU Insurance. Now, I wasn't part of the research, but they were happy to share it with me, and I share it with you today. So they looked at 3 classes of insurance through their agency and their broker business. So not direct, agency and broker. And they looked at what had happened in 12 months up until May 2015. Now, we've got the softest market that I've ever worked in. I'm actually getting boards contacting me saying, please come in and review my insurance, we are concerned. And one was Australia's largest retailer of furniture. So I had to go to the board, I had got all their paperwork. 2 years ago, their premium was $1.2 million. Last year, it was $900,000. This year, it was $600,000. Now, this is a company that get valuations every year. They send their accounts to us, and we do their business interruption valuation. And they had gone up 20% in that time in their revenue, but their premium had halved. And they were concerned that they weren't being protected. Where was the catch? They couldn't believe it. So in this very soft market, we've got only one policy out of 5 in SME, small and medium business packs that have an increase CPI or higher. 70%, no increase at all in a soft market. 60% don't have business interruption, and 1 in 5 didn't have liability insurance. They're appalling statistics. Now, if you compare this, and on top of this, I'll say a couple of other things. A couple of the insurers have gone to the broker cluster groups and said, we would like to put CPI increase on our property portfolio. And the brokers have been up in arms, horrified. That's not your job, that's our job. Do not touch it. At the same time, on direct business, they do it, and there is no complaints. There's been no great uproar by Choice Magazine or anyone else about CPI. And I keep stressing, CPI is not a good measure for the cost of construction. I got conned by one of the insurers. I thought I was actually writing a turnover-based wording for business interruption for an intermediary-based insurer. I was actually writing it for a direct-based insurer because they had two different, they have about 13 brands. So I got conned, and I was assured about 4 years ago that it would go into the broker market. It hasn't happened yet, but that insurer is getting 95% take-up on business interruption by selling direct. And they're giving 3 options to the client. It's an opt-out solution, and people are buying it. My son reckons it's like buying wine. You don't look like a cheapskate, so you don't buy the cheapest one, you buy the middle one, and so that at least they're getting some form of business interruption. So I can't believe that there isn't a board in the world that sells of an insurer that isn't looking at their distribution channel at the moment saying, am I better paying a commission to a broker and get these statistics, or am I better selling it direct? And I think that is a concern, and if we don't address that, we are going to end up like the accountants and the lawyers and not have a role. And I think just like there are fantastic travel agents who have made and continue to make a good living, there is a role for a good quality broker, but you can't be a post office box. You can't sell on price. Because as an accountant, I can tell you all our customers, they will budget for insurance the same as last year, probably with a bit more. But we're not going to them and saying, look, we can actually get you a higher sum insured. We can get you cyber insurance. We're just not doing it. We're just giving them their money back, and the tax man takes, in my country, 1/3 of it anyway. It's a stupid strategy that we should address. So for insureds, it means that when I go out as a claims person, underinsurance is a major, major problem in my country. For insurers, it's driving them to drink because they're not getting the growth in their soft market that they demand, that their overseas or their boards are demanding. And for general insurance brokers, where does that leave them as a value-added proposition, a genuine value-added proposition? Now, having said that, I can say 2 things with clear conscience, and I really mean it. I think your loss adjusters and your brokers are better trained and better performed than in my country. In my country, I'm actually calling for loss adjusters and claims officers to have some sort of qualification, some sort of registration, to get some sort of quality back into them. As a claims person, at the end of the day, I believe that the most important contract our clients enter into in their business life is their insurance contract. Why? Because it's protecting everything they've worked for. If I look at my own business, it's a sole source of income for now 3 generations of Mannings. It's my superannuation. It's my major investment. I forego today's lifestyle to keep inventing things and writing books and doing other things instead of having holidays. I do all these stupid things to try as trying to build an asset. It's the mortgage over my home. Banks don't lend to people. They don't lend to businesses. They want bricks and mortar. And it's also our place in society, our customers' place in society. And it staggers me that the people who invented insurance called the cost of insurance a premium. Now, premium means a little bit extra. It's something you pay more for something special. And yet we have become so focused on price and taken away that very meaning. I see too many people in our industry, and that's where the aggregator sites is. It's that neither party sees the value of insurance. And we've got to move it to where the salesperson believes in it and sees the value and how important insurance is. And your conference does that very well. It's when the customer and the seller gets some value. That's where true value add is. That's where the true profits are. And we've got to move away from that box. And what I often see is if the customer has a small claim and suddenly realises how important business interruption or any form of insurance is, they will move to that space anyway. But we don't want them to have a claim, because sometimes it can be a major claim that destroys them beforehand. So until we believe in ourselves and the value of insurance advice, then insurance is going to be the way the aggregator, just the cheapest price is going to win. So I suppose with that background, that's why I've developed all these products, trying to give the tools, the sales tools and the information in this digital age, because I understand that people don't learn the same way as I did. I had to go to books, go to the library, research things thoroughly. Now people want it instantaneous at their iPhone or whatever, at where and when they need it, and that's what we're trying to do. So it's an interesting time. To me, it is a genuine crossroads in our history. The past, to me, is the past, the future. There are lots of time bombs that we have to address, all those technologies I was talking about. But do we address them as threats, or do we address them as opportunities? In the past, all through history, insurance has been the solution. It's identified the problems and been the solution. We have to do that again. And the last thing I'd say is that our future is created by what we do today, not what we do tomorrow. With that, I'll take some questions. Oh, I will say, last thing, Audrey and her dad are actually representing me in Tasmania today at a conference down there for Insurance AdvisorNet. So that'll be her 5th conference. She's going to have her Tier 1, which is the basic insurance requirement, by Christmas. That's again, the whole education piece is something that we have to address in our country. That Tier 1 was invented for people of my generation who had no qualifications but 30 years of experience. It's not good for the kids coming through today. With that, I'll take some questions. Thank you.